gentlemen, let us begin again this afternoon. If you would mind taking your seats, please.
I don't see Mr. Gilchrist. I don't see Mr. Gilchrist,
No,
but
no.
I see Mr. Meresco and Mrs. Mezentseva. So I can look for Mr. Gilchrist.
Yeah. Okay, we move on now to the debate on the last subject. And I have three people who have indicated that they would like to speak. Let us start with Mr. Merezko. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Interestingly enough, I have started my academic career many, many years ago by teaching international humanitarian law. At that time, I was under the impression that it's a boring subject, that I will never in my life have to apply its rules or consider its rules. How wrong and naive I was at that time. And when Russia had invaded Ukraine, I realized that international humanitarian law is extremely important because it defends Ukraine and other countries. Geneva Conventions are also extremely important. The key question is how to make international humanitarian law more effective. And the answer to this crucial question is that by bringing to justice all those perpetrators who had committed crimes against international humanitarian law, war crimes, to bring to justice all war criminals. And of course, we should bring to justice sooner or later the major perpetrator, the major war criminal, which is Putin himself. It's impossible, maybe right now it looks impossible, but I'm sure that in the future, sooner or later, he will be brought to justice. As for Convention on the Status of Refugees, it's also extremely important document nowadays. For example, the Belarusian dictator Lukashenko, by using migrants as a weapon against Poland, he violates this convention on the status of refugees. He himself referred to the migrants whom he is using as refugees. And he can contribute to the solution of this migration crisis by applying this convention, by following the rules. Unfortunately, nowadays, he is in serious violation of this important convention. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. The next speaker is Ms. Mezentseva. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Thank you, dear Chair. You know, around a year ago, when I came up with my team with an idea that such a great organization as the Council of Europe, where the human rights are lying at the heart of it, has really to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the 1951 Refugee Convention, and has to not just celebrate but dedicate a file to it, was very well picked up by your fellow colleagues from UK delegation, and I highly appreciate the great and tremendous work of Lord Griffiths, the work of the leadership of the Migration, Refugees and Displaced Person Committee, of course, with the Secretariat, and it's also great work. But today we are talking not only about the documents of the 70 years ago, we're talking about 82.4 million refugees and 26.4 million registered refugees, and of course not only but also internally displaced people, which numbers are rising high in different countries, like in Ukraine, for instance, when it is registered around 1.7 million internally displaced people because of the aggression of one of the member states, which is Russia. And of course there are things which might be invisible because when we work with human rights, it's not often very well known where will we arrive in the end. But the current challenges like those which are linked to the ecosystem of our planet, and of course the pandemic which we all have faced, brought us to immediate solutions which we all have to proceed. And from my humble point of view, we never have to use migrant refugees and the internally displaced people as an instrument for political wars and attacks. Human rights have always to prevail, and please remember, colleagues, we are not talking only about the figures, but about human destinies. Thank you very much, dear reporter, for your tremendous work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. How do you pronounce your name? Right. It's you anyway.
Now it's on. It's Kaljulaid. It's Raimond Kaljulaid from Estonia. If I may say a few words, for Estonia, this is not an academic subject, really, because after and during the Second World War, many Estonians became refugees, crossing the Baltic Sea, sometimes in small boats, not meant for such open sea travel, and sometimes with small children, and oftentimes not reaching the shores, the safer shores where they were heading, leaving behind property which remained behind the Iron Curtain. So this really is an important topic for us, and it is highly important that we speak about these things. And lastly, I would really like to compliment Lord Griffiths for his work, which was superb, I think, in both in content and in form. It was a pleasure to read. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, does anyone else wish to take the floor? I can't see anyone, in which case I move back to Lord Balfe to respond, and you have 2 minutes.
Right. Thank you, President. I don't think any specific points have been raised on my report, so there's nothing particular to answer. The problem, as has been said, is with us. It's changed enormously, of course, since 1951, when the main aim of refugee resettlement was to clear up the big population movements which followed 1945. And the whole scenario has changed completely. But we are today in a situation where the West, in the shape of Europe and the Americas, is sucking in huge numbers of people who are looking for a better life. I don't have the solution to that, but my report is about the use of human rights law during a time of war, and I think it's a reasonably balanced approach to where we are today, so I hope the committee will endorse it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Balfe. Does the chairperson of the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights wish to take the floor? Mr. Silovitz, if you wish to take the floor, you will have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you, President. I would like to congratulate Lord Balfe with this very important report. Indeed, we got used to discuss the issue of asylum increasingly in political terms, in humanitarian terms, in security terms. But this is very important to keep in mind and not to forget that we have a clear legal framework. It is quite specific. The Geneva Conventions were adopted as a response to humanitarian crisis to catharsis after the World War II. And now increasingly we hear voices that this instrument is obsolete and we should reconsider it and modernize and adopt a new instrument. I am strongly against these proposals because it's quite clear that today it is impossible to find a consensus for the adoption of the document of such humanitarian spirit, because it's maybe somewhat paradoxical. So people tend to forget the tragedies of the past. And this was the main impact of this tragic fates of thousands and millions of people whose life could be saved should the governments and first of all democracies ensure some protection and asylum. And now, of course, there are new challenges, different views, but still these humanitarian obligations are there. And this is very important to remind ourselves about applicability of humanitarian law and about applicability of international human rights law. And although the right to asylum is not formally mentioned in the European Convention of Human Rights, still the Strasbourg Court increasingly often applies several provisions of the European Convention to the asylum cases. First of all, Article 3, of course, because this violation of non-refoulement principle is consistently interpreted as violation of prohibition of torture and human and degrading treatment. Also, the right to family life is applicable and a number of other lives. So I believe, of course, this is a political issue. Of course, this is a security issue. And we just had a debate on this most maybe topical issue, the situation of the Polish border with Belarus. But still, our legal obligations are there. And democracy should not forget about them. And this is why this report is so important. And once again, I commend Lord Ball for his important contribution. And I call upon your colleagues to support the draft resolution suggested by the rapporteur. Thank you, President.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to take Mr. Yildiz, who had indicated that he wanted to speak but hadn't got back by the time we started the debate. If you would like to take 3 minutes, that would be fine. Then I will come to Lord Griffiths.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is more than enough. Very kind of you. Indeed, I wish we could commemorate this 70th anniversary in better conditions. I appreciate the information by UNHCR. Unfortunately, there are so many refugees, migrants under protection and under severe conditions. In my country alone, that around 4 million Syrians, just Syrians, 800,000 of them children going to schools in Turkey. Every year, 450,000 newborns. Unfortunately, the core issue on the refugee coordination, of course, is the burden sharing. It is not efficient in any part of the world, including for my country. In Africa also, there are some refugee-received countries, but although the numbers may be smaller, but their conditions are so harsh. Mr. Chairman, I have one request from colleagues and from you here. Since I joined the PACE, we are talking about inviting Frontex here to brief us on their practices. These practices we see in television lately are so obviously against any rules we are talking here. Violent pushbacks, jeopardizing the life of these immigrants, even the basic rights. The EU colleagues here talk about this issue, criticize everybody, including us. I invite them to use their good offices to bring the Frontex here. Rejection of our invitation for so many times, I think it is an insult to our body. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yildiz. Now I turn back to Lord Griffiths, and you have 4 minutes of your time left to speak to us.
Thank you, Chairman and colleagues. It's been a privilege to do this so early into my career here with the Council of Europe. I listened carefully to the points that have been made. Yes, it is an important document now, the Convention. It is not an academic subject, the Convention. Certainly, as we just heard, the application of its core practices is hardly being done efficiently, and it seems to me that the call in the report for greater efficiency, for giving great attention to systems that work and work properly, is a proper observation, and I'm very grateful for it. So all I can say really is that this convention, which underlies what was called quaintly in a document we all got with a postage stamp yesterday, called a patrimony of conventions. That's a collective noun I hadn't thought of before, a flock of geese, a school of fish, and a patrimony of conventions. That is, agreements that are part of our inheritance. And it would be wrong to be swept away by the latest crisis from giving our proper consideration to the values that are incorporated within the Geneva Convention. I would say it is part of our DNA. It is essentially part of who we are as a continent, and however difficult the crises that face us, and we face some of them during the course of these meetings, we must never forget what underlies and what creates the values for the continent we live on. The astute amongst those listening will have noticed that I made no mention to the United Kingdom Parliament. I do that in the United Kingdom Parliament. There is so much that we in Britain have to learn about a proper application of the values of this convention. I keep my powder dry. And so, my dear friends and Mr. President, thank you once again for the enormous privilege of being able to bring this simple report to the attention of the meeting. I trust that it will not be dismissed because it is simple, but be understood to be profound in its simplicity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Griffiths. Now, does the chairperson of the Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons wish to take the floor? Mr. Frides, you have 3 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I'd like first of all to reply to the question put by Mr. Idris's question with regard to Frontex. Yes, indeed, Frontex on a repeated fashion has not come to the committee to talk to us, but we have had contact with Mr. Gomeden. He's the head of a new Frontex unit for fundamental rights, and we hope things will start improving next year. With regard to Lord Griffiths' report, well, it's arriving just at the right time, because we're talking about the commitment of European states with regard to refugees and international cooperation that's related to this, and we have to face a huge pressure here. To prepare this report, the rapporteur had fruitful exchanges with the HCR Bureau in Geneva and in London, and had very close cooperation with the HCR representative in Strasbourg, Mr. Andreas Wissner. I'd like to thank Andreas Wissner very much indeed. In fact, I'd like to also underline the importance of supporting the commitment towards the people who are finding themselves in an extremely vulnerable situation. I do hope that Member States will make their own commitments by contributing to the implementation of the Council of Europe's Action Plan on the protection of vulnerable persons against a backdrop of migration and asylum in Europe. The fate of refugees hinges very much on exactly what happens to these people once they've made their asylum application. We hope that these asylum applications can be lodged formally. In the coming days and weeks, as put forward by the draft resolution, I'd like to call on Member States to align themselves with the UNHCR to implement its strategy on additional ways of welcoming refugees. We want to strengthen the autonomy of refugees for the periods from 2025 to 2028 in coordination with everything that's been achieved up to now by the UNHCR. And this would also address an essential aspect related to the efforts carried out to protect refugees. I'd like to emphasize the importance of strengthening the autonomy of such people. it's to recognize and acknowledge their degrees and diplomas. They're all a lot of them are highly qualified, and they need to be offered employment in connection with their qualifications. The Council of Europe has developed the requisite tools by setting up a pan-European scale project in the context of the Lisbon Convention on the recognition of qualifications. We hope to contribute efficiently to the implementation of the UN Compact on Refugees, which we will support. I'd also like to underline the importance of respecting the commitments that we subscribe to at international level. We need to keep to your word for people. This is a sign of dignity. And if you can stick to your word and your commitment, this is a sign of dignity and responsibility as well. Treaties such as the 1951 Convention related to the status of refugees and the European Convention on Human Rights are the founding blocks of rights, and we need to strengthen our commitments. The future of Europe depends on this. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to call on you to support this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Frides. Well, now I'm going to try to have a vote on this, and we've seen that that's not always easy, but let us try. There are no amendments. The Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights has presented a draft resolution on celebrating the 70th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions, the contribution of the Council of Europe to the increasing synergy between international humanitarian law and international human rights. And as I've said, no amendments have been made to that. So we will now move straight away to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15394. And to be adopted, a simple majority is required. Will all those in favour please show?
No, Lord Dundee cannot be. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, I see. 19. But
And
I didn't count Lord Dundee.
and those against?
18.
Anyone against? No one against.
Unanimous.
Good. Any abstentions? No? Well, well, thank you very much for that. You've made my job an absolute dream. Thank you very much.
Unanimous.
And now it's time to hand over to the next chairman.
Mrs. Andrikina. Thank you, John. Yeah, you can do the second vote.
What?
Yeah. Valérie, tu peux aider le président?
No? I don't have one. The Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons presented a draft resolution. We shall now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15396. A simple majority is required. All those in favour, please show. Okay. Those against? One, is that one against? No. Any abstentions? No? Well, thank you again. Thank you very much indeed. Right. That's yours, and let me hand over.
Yes. They already finished this? Not yet? No, this is
Hello, dear colleagues. We now come to the debate on the report on voluntary relocation of migrants in need of humanitarian protection and voluntary resettlement of refugees, which will be presented by Lord Alexander Dundee, Rapporteur of the Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons. Lord Dundee, you have 10 minutes in total, which you may divide between presentation of the report and reply to the debate. And the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Madam President. And colleagues, having heard the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and after adopting two resolutions referring to the 70th anniversary of the 1951 Refugee Convention, we might all ask ourselves, what can we do to make sure that refugees are better protected and given necessary humanitarian assistance? 70 years ago, in Europe and many parts of the world, the wounds of the Second World War were painfully visible. Huge numbers of people had been forced to leave their homes or had fled persecution, the war and the so-called Cold War afterwards. As a result, the 1951 Refugee Convention recommended inter alia, and I quote, that governments continue to receive refugees in their territories and that they act in concert in a true spirit of international cooperation in order that these refugees may find asylum and the possibility of resettlement. The subject of my report today relates to the essence of the Refugee Convention and our earlier debates. UNHCR estimates that 82.4 million people worldwide was forcibly displaced at the end of 2020. 20.7 million of them were refugees under the mandate of the UNHCR. Among our member states, Turkey and Germany hosted the highest number of refugees, with 3.7 million in Turkey and 1.2 million in Germany. Compared to these figures, the number of resettlements may appear to be low. In 2020, UNHCR identifies nearly 40,000 candidate cases for resettlement globally, of which 22,800 actually took place. Nevertheless, this is an enormous achievement at a time when most countries restricted international travel and were in lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The numbers for this year are slightly higher, but still fall well short of that of roughly 60,000 refugees resettled annually before 2020. After I tabled the motion for this report in January 2020, two events made a strong impact only a couple of months later. Firstly, the COVID-19 pandemic caused a halt to all resettlements. Then secondly, thousands of migrants on the Turkish border with Greece tried to force their way into Greece, leading the EU Commission to set up an emergency programme for Greece. The initial aim was a voluntary relocation of 1,600 unaccompanied children and families. That programme has proved to work extremely well within the first 12 months, relocating 3,914 persons to several EU member states, as well as Iceland, Switzerland and Norway. Mr. Theodoros Rousopoulos of our PACE Migration Committee has told me that so far 4,401 people have been relocated from Greece, with a further 89 people about to be. In addition, 3,322 transfers were organised for the purpose of family reunification, including those to the United Kingdom. The year 2021 has witnessed the arrival of many more migrants, especially in Italy and Spain, but also in Cyprus, Malta and the United Kingdom, putting extraordinary pressure on cities and communities to accommodate these persons and process their asylum application. For years, Bosnia and Herzegovina has become accustomed to migrants trying to cross the border with Croatia. Following the takeover by the Taliban, a great many Afghan citizens have been evacuated, thus adding to the total number for resettlement in due course. Most recently, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland, as well as Germany, received thousands of irregular migrants through Belarus. Such emergency situations demand European focus, help and solidarity. We know only too well what happens through failure to react in time. Refugees often then fall prey to smugglers and human trafficking and lose their lives on dangerous routes to Europe. Consequently, the Mediterranean Sea has sadly become the deadliest of routes. In that context, let us praise Italy, where earlier this year the island of Lampedusa decided to create a monument dedicated to those who have lost their lives in the Mediterranean, including in the tragic shipwreck in October 2013, when more than 360 migrants died near Lampedusa. This report's draft resolution supports the voluntary relocation of migrants, asylum seekers and refugees in need of humanitarian protection to third countries for determining their migration status. That is, when countries of first arrival are unable to accommodate them adequately and process their asylum applications, for instance, due to an overwhelming large number of arrivals. Besides relocation, resettlements have received more attention lately. I was glad to join the Forum on Resettlement organised by EU Commissioner Ylva Johansson on the 9th of July this year. It was good to hear then about the commitment of the United States government to increase its numbers of resettlements again. Canada joined in this effort and has recently resettled refugees from camps in Libya. Italy, the host of this standing committee, has also resettled refugees from Libya under a bilateral agreement. The Italian Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs announced that this would happen during our European web conference organised by the United Kingdom Parliament on the 4th of December 2020. For the preparation of my report, along with Mr. Rudiger Dosso of the PACE Migration Committee, I had organised a series of 4 web conferences starting on the occasion of World Refugee Day in June 2020, with the latest having been held on the occasion of World Refugee Day this year. Many colleagues of the Parliamentary Assembly participated, as well as colleagues from the OSCE Parliament Assembly. In fact, the first one was opened by the chair of the Committee of Ministers, the Greek Foreign Minister, Mr. Varvitsiotis, who previously had been a member of our PACE Migration Committee and who drew attention to the severe situation in Greece and called for more relocations in our conference of June 2020. Relocations and resettlements are, of course, closely related, and it is often difficult to distinguish them legally, not least when migrants change their status on their migration route. On the other hand, relocations and resettlements reflect equally the same humanitarian need. Such transfers can only be made voluntarily with the cooperation of the refugee concerned. Likewise, the host country has to agree as well. One of the objectives of my report is to increase the willingness of host countries to accept resettled or relocated refugees. An interesting example is the private sponsorship of resettlements, which has been carried out with great success in Canada for over many years, and ever since the resettlement of Vietnamese boat people in the late 1970s. The charity Sant Egidio has managed to resettle more than 30 refugees from the Kara Tepe camp on the Greek island of Lesbos to Italian families earlier this year. There are also other charities and endeavours which try to help refugees integrate into the communities of host locations, such as Siobhan's Trust, our own small family charity named after my wife and which, within the United Kingdom, works in the city of Dundee. We, as parliamentarians, can do a lot in our own parliaments, as well as at European and international level. The importance is to recognise humanitarian emergencies for refugees and start acting. Europe has been built on common values, in particular humanitarian ones. A great deal still has to be done, yet recent performance can give much hope and confidence. St. Francis of Assisi said, "All the darkness in the world cannot extinguish the light of a single candle." more than 4,000 persons recently relocated from Greece and more than 20,000 persons resettled globally are surely shining lights for meeting the challenge of humanitarian responsibility to help refugees in need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Dundee, for your presentation. Now I open the discussion. Does anyone wish to take the floor? Please show. Yes. Madam Fiona Olafin, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I wish to commend Lord Dundee on his excellent report and opinion. And it's obvious that he's very compassionate and understanding in relation to the situation that faces so many migrants and so many refugees. And it's also very obvious that we need to do more to help support those that are in very difficult situations because of the dangers in their own territories and countries, and obviously they face huge dangers in terms of leaving their country and looking for safe space and safe asylum. There's one particular issue that I would like to mention here. Lord Dundee was speaking about Lesbos and the situation there, and I've no doubt that it is very difficult for the Greek people to manage and to support. But the civil society organisations that are there trying to help refugees and migrants are under huge pressure. And I want to speak in particular about two of these volunteers who were on trial in a Greek court last Thursday, the 18th of November, and they were Sarah Mardini and Sean Binder. Sean is a German citizen but spent his life in Ireland growing up, so there's a lot of interest in his situation, and basically himself and Sarah and others have spent 3 years helping to support migrants, and Sean himself was arrested in 2018 and spent 106 days in prison in Greece. He specialised in defence and security policy in college, and he has a background as a rescue diver and really felt that he could be of assistance to those that are trying to reach safety. But sadly, he was charged with smuggling and, as I mentioned, spent 106 days in jail. And at the trial, there was a feeling that himself and Sarah could actually spend up to 25 years in jail. I know that many MEPs have expressed concern about 24 different humanitarian workers that were involved, but they were essentially doing life-saving humanitarian work, and it is my belief that there's a serious breach of Sean's and the others' human rights. It's so sad to see people being criminalised across Europe for doing humanitarian work in helping refugees and migrants. Now, the trial last Thursday was postponed, and we don't know when it's going to be, but I would like to bring this attention. I believe it's important that we speak about it and that we possibly come to some form of resolution around it. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam O'Loughlin. Anybody else who would like to contribute to this debate? No? So I close the speakers list, and I call Lord Dundee to respond, but you have 2 minutes only, please.
Thank you very much, Madam President, for giving me the floor again. I thank very much Madam O'Loughlin, the leader of the Irish delegation, for her contribution, which shows the need for relocation and resettlement is a constant challenge. Conflicts and persecutions, but also environmental disasters, will unfortunately continue to force people to leave their home. At the same time, each situation will be new and different, requiring individual analysis and reaction. From a political viewpoint, it may be difficult to compare the situation at the borders of Belarus with the situation in camps around the Mediterranean Sea or the English Channel. However, it is always humans who suffer and need our concrete humanitarian assistance. Let me conclude, therefore, with a positive outlook and a congratulation to Italy for having now relocated from Afghanistan Sharbat Gula, whose picture became famous in 1985 on the cover page of the National Geographic when she'd been forced to flee war in Afghanistan and received shelter in a camp in Pakistan. Her life is a mirror of what people in Afghanistan have endured for the past 4 decades, and it is a strong reminder that we must not look away from such suffering. Voluntary relocations and resettlements can save lives. Thank you very much again, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. Does the chairperson of the Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons wish to take the floor? If yes, Mr. Frieders, the floor is yours, please.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you, President. A few weeks before Europe's lockdown, and before the lockdown all over the world owing to COVID-19, Lord Dundee tabled a motion for a report on this topic. We had borders closed, we no longer had many international flights, and under these exceptional circumstances, one might have thought that we didn't need a report on this topic, because the resettlement of refugees also came to a halt. But through this very important report, Lord Dundee, in fact, wrote very enthusiastically so as to pinpoint the need for additional protection to refugees, especially during the pandemic. He drew in part on the work done by our committee, the work we did throughout the pandemic, the various conferences organized by the British Parliament as well. It was a novel topic at the time, and I was very pleased to meet and discuss with the chairperson of the ad hoc committee of the OCPA, Ms. Sederhoff. In my country, Switzerland, we did indeed relocate migrants who came from refugee camps in Greece. This was part of an emergency program launched by the EU at a time when fear of COVID-19 was a reason too often cited to block migrants at Europe's borders. The drafting of this report, which garnered a lot of attention, helped us to highlight the fact that we need to take humanitarian action in emergencies. Although relocation of migrants and refugees only helps a small number of people, it's nonetheless essential, as the Council of Europe is underpinned by humanistic values and human rights. The discussion we had this morning about the situation on the border between Poland and Belarus, that kind of action is also needed there. Relocating migrants from camps in Libya or Greece underscores the fact that we need to continue fighting for human values and promoting this practice of relocation. We hope that Lord Dundee's report and the resolution will help us to recognize that need on a wider scale, and we staunchly support this resolution. Also, just in response to the representative of Ireland, you spoke about this very difficult situation, about the fact that Europe's a bit like a fortress, bringing up the drawbridge. We've got allegations targeting NGOs, Frontex as well. All of these issues are a big problem, and therefore I staunchly support these people who have been accused of smuggling wrongly, in my opinion, when actually this was a humanitarian action they took.
The debate is closed. We shall now proceed to vote. I would like to remind you that only members of the Standing Committee are entitled to vote. The Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons has presented a draft resolution to which 2 amendments have been tabled. I would like to inform you that both amendments were unanimously approved by the Committee on Migration, Refugees and Displaced Persons at its meeting yesterday. Therefore, if no member objects, these amendments are declared adopted according to Rule 34.11. Does anyone object? No. So, as there is no objection, I declare that amendments 1 and 2 to the draft resolution adopted in accordance with Rule 34.11. We shall now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15401 as amended. To be adopted, a simple majority is required. All those in favor, please show.
Parce qu'il faut pas compter de 17.
17 in favor. Those against, please show. Nobody is against. Abstentions? One abstention. So the draft resolution 15401 is adopted with 17 in favor, 0 against, and 1 abstention. My congratulations to the rapporteur and the committee. Now we move to the next item of our agenda, item number 17, Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development. And we now come to the debate on the report on best interests of the child and policies to ensure a work-life balance from the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development. This report will be presented by Ms. Françoise Gueto-Gache. I understand that this is your last report to the Assembly, and that after 17 years of parliamentary mandate in Luxembourg, and also 4 years in government, you are retiring at the end of the year. You joined our Assembly in 2014, and you have been involved in the work of the Social Affairs Committee and the Equality Committee. I thank you for your commitment to our Assembly and wish you all the best in your future projects.
Thank you so much.
Madame Gueto-Gache, the floor is yours, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam President. Thank you for very kind words. President, dear colleagues, I do think that most of us are parents, and I'm sure you agree with me if I tell you that the arrival of a baby spells huge changes within a family. However, these changes must always be in the best interest of the child, and responsibility for this lies, of course, with the parents. Over the years, family policies have been adapted to the variety of family situations that exist, and the successful implementation of them depends on coordination between the different stakeholders, in other words, professionals, parents and authorities. The aim of my report was to review, in the light of the best interest of the child, the various family policies, childcare arrangements and related arrangements in the world of work. Respecting the best interest of the child must guide us in our efforts to improve these policies. It is true that family policies have changed. The principle of legal equality between parents has been introduced into legislation. Parental leave has been introduced and the role of fathers has also changed. The states allocate financial benefits, benefits in kind, tax rebates, and they've introduced maternity and also paternity leave. States have made commitments through the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, goals number 4 and 5. While access to childcare benefits parents, it is undeniable that for many children there are also negative effects. Some may feel neglected, some may feel anxious, some may feel they do not experience enough of their parents. Even in 2021, reconciling work and family life remains a challenge, but in no case should the cost factor be overvalued. It is extremely important to mobilise sufficient public funds for the provision of childcare. Doubling the services on offer is not enough. Above all, we must invest in the quality of care. For the youngest children, it is essential to create a solid framework of trust, to hire real childcare professionals, to invest in their training, and to specify the maximum time a child can spend in a childcare centre. On the parent side, we need to increase parental leave and to respond to as many different family situations as possible. We need to think about special leave for grandparents, focus on work flexibility, and develop more teleworking. But above all, we must value the role of parents. They have a central role to play, and to carry out this role, they need to have time available for their children. A child needs a strong and secure attachment to develop social, emotional, and cognitive learning. And interaction, of course, with his parents plays a key role here. Unfortunately, many parents do not have this time. Unfortunately, screens are replacing dialogue, games, and real interaction. This is a fact that should really concern us. Family policies must help parents to exercise their role properly, not replace them. To this end, and in order to guide and support parents properly, various countries have set up networks of parental advisor who are involved from the maternity ward and right up to after the birth. They guide parents in their parenting and provide real and very concrete support. They also provide appropriate assistance to the most vulnerable, thus helping to combat poverty and subsequently fight for equal opportunities. To this end, good practices are in place in different countries: preschool education, multilingual support, most of the time free of charge, support schemes for parents, special allowances, and subsidies to make childcare more accessible. All of this incurs huge costs, but these costs are very much needed to ensure the healthy development of the youngest children. Let me quote Frederick Douglass, who lived from 1818 to 1895, a former slave who became a high-ranking American official. I quote, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." End of quote. A massive and sustained investment in family policies will reap social and economic benefits. Early childhood is a very special age. Protecting the very first years of a child's life should be a national focus. It's a promising but very fragile period. 85% of a child's brain develops in their first 5 years. The first 1,000 days, from the end of pregnancy to the age of 2, coincide with the most spectacular growth of the child's brain. Member states should place this very high on their agenda. The first 1,000 days are focused on the needs of children and support for the family. In my report, you will find many examples of good practice from a number of different countries which recognize this period as being crucial for the future development of children. The first 1,000 days count for a lifetime. Investing in early childhood is a societal choice. UNICEF has called on countries to do so to ensure an optimal start in life. Parents and early childhood professionals must provide the security and love necessary for development, enabling babies to find the resources to build their emotional security as a prerequisite for developing confidence in society and building a balanced personality. Member states should create the conditions to enable adults to fulfill their respective roles. In this respect, you will also find the most important messages in the resolution and recommendation. Member states should ensure that parental leave can be taken by both parents without being disadvantaged afterwards. They should think about creating special leave, for example, for grandparents who can support the family as well. They should ensure good working conditions, especially in times of crisis. They should strengthen mental health services for children and parents, as well as welfare services against domestic violence, and also provide special support for the most vulnerable children. They should adopt a national strategy for early childhood and ensuring the quality of childcare. For instance, they should avoid excessive turnover of childcare staff. They should also provide free training for young parents and combat screen addiction, both among children and parents and adults. And to finish, they should continuously monitor family policies. National, local and regional authorities, parents and professionals must cooperate with the ultimate goal of children's well-being, ensuring that the necessary resources are made available. As the Council of Europe is currently preparing a new strategy for the children's rights of the child from 2022 to 2027, we recommend that the Committee of Ministers incorporate the issues of the first 1,000 days policy. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Madam Hetogash. I open the discussion, and I know that the chairman of the committee, Mr. Luis Leite Ramos, he has to catch his plane, so he will be our first speaker. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam President. Thank you for giving me the floor. First of all, I'd like to thank Mrs. Hetogash for her excellent report, and I'd like to thank her for work that's being carried out within our committee. I'd like to wish her all the very best in her future. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the report that we're debating is a priority for our societies, the well-being of our children. We need to provide the necessary help before parents, once a child arrives, to ensure that the best interests of the child are protected. In this report, our colleague underlines a number of important points, and different avenues have been identified that we can explore to strengthen this relationship. We need to reconcile the work-life balance of parents so that they can spend more time with their children. Parents, the extended family and professionals who care for children play an essential role in ensuring, as our rapporteur said on a number of occasions, their physical, mental and psychological development and well-being. They must provide a safe, secure and loving environment for children to grow up in. The state has responsibilities in this area. The state must create the right conditions to enable adults to fulfill their role and support their children's development in the best possible way. By protecting children from illness, poverty and emotional deprivation through massive and sustained investment in family policies, states are assured of reaping both economic and social benefits and of also building a solid foundation for a peaceful and prosperous future. We need to invest massively in early childhood and help parents in the role they have to play. The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us how important the enlarged family has a role to play. Children should feel they're secure, they're loved, and they can develop in a harmonious fashion to become responsible members of society. Society should remain vigilant and ensure that the norms defended by the Council of Europe are implemented. Respect for the best interests of the child must guide us in the continuous improvement of public policies to ensure a balance between private and professional life. Thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leite Ramos. Our next speaker is Mr. Gunnarsson. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Ms. Hetogash, for your work, which is extremely important. Parenting is one of the greatest responsibilities we take on in life, and we should not view it lightly. And we should not view it lightly on a societal basis, neither on the state level nor the municipal level. It's very important because as many of us have heard and read, it takes a village. It's bringing up a child is not the work of a single person or a single family. It's the work of society as well. Parents are extremely important, but parents usually cannot do it all by themselves. They need help in that role. We need to make sure that there is adequate maternal care. We need to make sure that care for infant health services is adequate, that parental leave is available and assured from the birth of the child. We need to make sure we allow for daycare, parental leave in the formative years of the child, and so on and so forth. These are many, many issues. In Iceland, we recently lengthened the parental leave following childbirth to 12 months, with equal months allowed to both genders. This is extremely important because if it's one of the mechanisms we can use to make certain that real equality between the genders and between all genders is gained. We have to remember that children are our future, and we should do everything we can to make it bright, equal and fulfilling. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gunnarsson. Does anyone wish to take the floor? Yes, please, Madam Fiona O'Loughlin. 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam President. This is an absolutely excellent report. I'd like to congratulate the rapporteur, and I think it's really, really important that we have the opportunity to endorse what she says. When we think about the last 20 months and what children have endured, children, as we know from a lot of extensive research, really pick up on stress in the home, and it leads to many psychological problems for them, as well as educational problems in terms of learning. And there is no doubt that in our households right across Europe, in terms of the pandemic, there has been a lot of stress, both in terms of health, in terms of finance, in terms of people not being able to see or meet their loved ones. So we always have to be very conscious of that impact on our young children. When we think of our children, those in particular that are vulnerable from birth for different reasons, we need to be able to, every state should be able to help and support and have the necessary interventions with therapies, etc., if they're needed. But in terms of addressing the work-life balance, I think that's hugely important, and we all need to take lessons from that and to be able to support young people in their creativity, in their problem-solving skills, in helping support their critical thinking, because sometimes we hear of young people and children being under pressure to study and work a lot to be the very best that they can be academically. But I think it's more important that we help them develop the skills to be able to deal with relationships both within their home and within the friends within their neighbourhood, and to be able to learn the skills that we need for adapting to life. And to be able to do that, of course, parents need to do that. I really envy Iceland with what they have done in terms of having equal paternity leave. I think that that's hugely important. In Ireland, we have really just started that. We only introduced the first paternity leave about 6 years ago, but it is progressing. And I think that we have so much to learn in this area, but there is no doubt that we need to support parents in whatever way they need support in terms of how they bring up their children to be good, responsible citizens, to be able to contribute to their own lives and to society in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else who would like to participate in this debate, please show. Okay, so the speakers list is closed, and I call Ms. Gash to respond. You have 3 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la. Thank you very much indeed, Madam President. I'd like first of all to thank everyone who took the floor on this debate. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your kind words as well. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank everyone I've been able to work with within the Parliamentary Assembly, and I'd like to thank in particular Mr. Guillaume Parent from the committee for all the huge help they provided me with for drafting this report. I'd like to thank all of you, and may I just finish by saying please remain in good health. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. The debate is closed. Now we come to the votes. The Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development has presented a draft resolution on best interests of the child and policies to ensure a work-life balance, to which no amendments have been tabled. So we will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15405. To be adopted, a simple majority is required. And now I ask those who are in favor, please show. Yes, I also see 12. 12 in favor. Who is those against? Thank you. Abstentions? Yes, so the draft resolution 15405 is adopted unanimously. Congratulations to our rapporteur. Yes.
Yes, now we shall go to the recommendation.
Okay.
Adoption of the recommendation.
Yes, the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development has also presented a draft recommendation to which no amendments have been tabled. So we shall now proceed to vote on the draft recommendation contained in document 15405. To be adopted, a two-thirds majority is required. All those in favor, please show. All those in favor, please show. $15, thank you. Those against? Nobody's against. Abstentions? No one. So the draft recommendation is adopted unanimously. My congratulations to the rapporteur and the committee. Item 18 of our agenda, Culture, Science, Education and Media. We now come to the discussion of the report on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on education and culture from the Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media. This report will be presented by the rapporteur, Mr. Konstantinos Evstachiou. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As it is said in the draft resolution, the long periods of isolation during the COVID-19 pandemic have shown to what degree education and exposure to culture are vital for individual and collective well-being. These two sectors should receive the deserved support and higher priority at political level in our respective member states. It is fortunate that both the European Commission and the European Parliament have taken important political steps to ensure that education and culture sectors are considered among priorities and will be eligible for support through the Emergency European Recovery and Resilience Facility with a reinforced EU budget for the period 21-27. However, to benefit from this support, education and culture must be included in national recovery programs. So, it is important that national strategies should build on synergies and acknowledge that culture and education policies should be mutually reinforcing. To this respect, the Council of Europe reference framework of competences for democratic culture provides, in my view, an excellent basis to develop innovative partnerships and projects between schools and different cultural sectors to guide young people in developing key democratic competences. The cultural and creative sectors have shown exceptional inventiveness during the COVID crisis to provide access to arts, culture, and creativity for the well-being of citizens, local communities, and societies at large, despite the difficult working conditions. The cultural and creative sectors have shown that their potential to contribute more widely to a deeper process to reformulate our collective ambitions for a better, more inclusive, and more sustainable society, a genuine reset. Supporting artists and micro-enterprises that provide a very rich and diverse cultural fabric in Europe and investing in cultural vitality is a powerful political means to actively engage citizens, to open public debates on key societal issues, and to ensure a long-term democratic stability in Europe. In cooperation with the European Union, the Council of Europe has developed a set of indicators to demonstrate this correlation between investments in cultural vitality and democracy. This set of indicators should be valuable to decision makers to argue and justify investments in culture as medium and long-term investments in more inclusive, resilient, and democratic societies. In the context of UN 2030 Sustainable Development Goals and of the European Green Deal, investments in education and in culture and creative sectors in Europe could also be an integral part of investments and innovation, leading towards more sustainable and creative economies, building synergies, mainstreaming culture and education in other sectors, and providing incentiveness for creative partnerships with private sectors could be key for the future. Another important issue that I have dealt with in my report is online access to education and culture. The digital space became the main place for schools and higher education institutions to provide education and for numerous actors in cultural and creative sectors to perform and connect with their audiences. While this can be a very positive trend to democratize access to education and culture, it also brings serious threats. The swift change to almost exclusive use of digital technologies has deepened the existing digital divide and inequalities and deprived artists and creative sectors of fair revenue due to lack of regulation. It would be urgent to resolve those persisting difficulties with global digital providers and to establish a strong European digital framework that would be well adapted for online education and for various cultural online offers. The digital divide has also further exacerbated disadvantaged children and those facing physical or mental difficulties, as well as their caretakers. These children were disproportionately affected by the pandemic and even more isolated from their school community to the physical distance imposed. It is therefore imperative to rethink ways in which also these children can fully benefit from the immense potential of digital learning tools and the need to digitalize education in our member states. In my draft resolution, we call on governments and parliaments of our respective member states to evaluate lessons learned from the implementation of emergency measures and to review policies, putting more emphasis on the long-term perspective and to address structural weaknesses which have deepened during the COVID-19 pandemic. It makes a number of proposals to be considered concerning the overall policy framework and then more specifically concerning each sector. I also propose to call on the European Union to cooperate more closely with the Council of Europe and support innovative projects and European exchange programs that could serve as guidelines to develop new models, building synergies, mainstreaming culture and education in other sectors, and providing incentiveness for creative partnerships with private sectors would be essential for the future. In my draft recommendation, we mention that the Council of Europe has a long-standing experience in the field of education and culture and must stay at the forefront for positioning them as an integral part of democratic processes. In the draft recommendation, I propose to call on the intergovernmental sector of the Council of Europe to deliver policy guidance and develop practical tools to assist member states in shaping new national models for a sustainable functioning of education and cultural sectors and for building synergies. For example, to develop a standard-setting instrument on inclusive quality education, taking into consideration the new online hybrid education environment, to finalize, in line with the Declaration of Ministers, the work on a model framework to govern equitable partnerships between business enterprises and education institutions, to create guidance for innovative approaches and partnerships between the education and culture sectors to implement the Council of Europe reference framework of competences for democratic culture. Let me conclude that we must do our most to argue at the level of the Parliamentary Assembly and nationally in our parliaments that investments in education and culture sectors are fundamental to support democratic, cohesive, more sustainable and resilient societies for all their inhabitants on equal status, that are able to address the numerous social, cultural, economic, and environmental challenges of the 21st century. I thank you for your attention, and I invite you to support my proposals with your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evstatiou. I open the discussion now, and does anyone wish to take the floor? Mr. Gunnarsson, please. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Evstatiou, for bringing to our attention an extremely important aspect of the pandemic, and putting forward guidelines for us to sort of guide the way out of it, and making sure that we don't make pitfalls that we could otherwise make. COVID has shown us that schools and education are essentials for our societies, not only as educational programs, but also for the mental health of younger children and younger adults. And not the least, they're extremely important for our economies. Culture and the cultural events, for example, have taken a heavy loss during COVID, and it's imperative that we address this in our countries. In Iceland, we were fortunate enough during most of the pandemic not to close our schools, and this has proven critical. However, cultural events were widely cancelled, and this has obviously been very difficult for that sector. However, like in every crisis, there is a silver lining, and for example, the development of various online events and virtual events, and also the technology to provide us with these events, has been extremely productive, and this has helped a lot. Now, in our stimulus packages, our societies have to include culture and education so that we can move faster and gain faster traction out of the pandemic once it subsides, and that will eventually make our societies stronger and help us build up into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gunnarsson. Does anyone wish to speak now?
Sorry.
Nobody? Then I call Mr. Evstatiou to respond, please.
Thank you once more. Taking advantage of Mr. Gunnarsson suggests, yes, the guidelines are of a fundamental role in this respect, and the mental health and the physical health of young children is of utmost importance in our society. Sometimes economical loss is much lesser than the societal ones. That's why I had just a few more to formally conclude this debate. As we have seen, culture and education are closely interlinked. What we need is to integrate digital cultural activities to the learning experience and the academic curricula to the greatest extent possible. This can be hugely beneficial, as culture can serve as an educational method accessible to all, even in situations of emergency. Education can thus adopt a dynamic culture profile. We have spoken about the effects of the pandemic on education and culture, and especially how the pandemic exposed the many existing structural inequalities and accessing education and culture, sometimes even widening these inequalities, especially the
Yes. I believe the report of Mr. Statue is very important because we strongly believe that culture and school are such important instruments for democracy. So our Council of Europe and our organization believe in democracy and human rights, and we don't have democracy and human rights without culture. So in this pandemic period, we understand how we can lose a lot by closing each self in our house, and how we can lose a lot, for example, our child when they don't meet together. But we also know that the new technological instruments can help us to do something that we can't do in the past. So I believe this report gives us a very important and strong instrument for the future, because maybe there will be another pandemic situation, because we are again in pandemic situation, and because we can help new instruments for strongly do better for democracy also in not pandemic situation, I hope. And also, and last important things I want, the rule of all people of music and art and theater is very important for us, is very important for democracy. And in all our country, we understand that we have to help them in economic way during the pandemic situation. But that very important report teach us and explain that we have to do more for them also when we are not in pandemic situation, because we can't lose art if we don't want to lose democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Rampi. The debate is closed. And now we come to the votes. The Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media has presented a draft resolution on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on education and culture, to which no amendments have been tabled. We will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution, document 15397. To be adopted, a simple majority is required. And now, colleagues, all those in favor, please show. All those in favor, please show. Tw 12 in favor. Those against? Nobody? Abstentions? No abstentions. So the draft resolution 15397 is adopted unanimously. The same committee, the Committee on Culture, Science, Education and Media, has also presented a draft recommendation to which no amendments have been tabled. We shall now proceed to vote on the draft recommendation, document 15397. To be adopted, a 2/3 majority is required. So, colleagues, all those in favor, please show. Fifteen in favor. Those, thank you. Those against? Nobody's against. Abstentions? Nobody abstained. So the draft recommendation 15397 has been adopted unanimously. My congratulations to the rapporteur and the committee. And now I invite dear colleague Kimmo Kiljunen to chair the meeting. Thank you.
Final part of our session, standing committee here in Rome. Hopefully we still have strength to go the last issues through. The overall title for us for two reports are Equality and Non-Discrimination. Report on gender aspects and human rights implication of pornography. And that will be presented by Mr. Frank Heinrich, who is the rapporteur of the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination. So, Mr. Heinrich, you have 10 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm here.
Yes.
Up here on your left.
Okay, good.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, maybe one of you or the other has had the opportunity to see the same poster or leaflet that I read once in a close subject, not the same. What if it were who were beaten and raped again and again and again? And if it were your niece who was scammed into prostitution by a so-called lover boy? And if it were your sister who had been forced against her will and were too ashamed to talk? Before I was a member of Parliament, the German Parliament, and member of this group, I worked in the Salvation Army. So I was neither ignorant of the situation that in my country, Germany, as in some others, was a platform. The country was a platform for human traffickers using women as sex slaves, nor that hundreds of thousands of women in prostitution were not doing it for fun. But that became clear to me along the years, meeting survivors and bringing awareness to all kinds of people who would often at first not believe it, or rather not listen. And it became clear to me that what is happening deep down does not start deep down. That before diving into one of the darkest sides of our society, we are actually already bathing in that same water. And streaming very powerful in that is the current porn industry. That's where I'm now at my subject of the report. In my report about gender aspects and human rights implications of pornography, you will read that 66% of men and 41% of women consume porn on a monthly, regular basis. Porn has sort of always existed, but its current industry is recent and is a mass phenomenon that influences our societies. Porn sites have more visitors, and I had to learn that while researching for this report, more visitors than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined. And an estimated 50% of all internet traffic is related to sex. So most boys and girls, the ones that we heard in one report earlier, are exposed to online porn, and we should look after that and protect them, whether it's danger in it. The connection between sexual violence and porn is well documented. And major porn providers make pure violence widely available. Gang rape, torture, humiliation, choking, beating and physical violence, depictions of slavery and forced prostitution, hate speech, sexual harassment, incest, bestiality, and child abuse. In my report, you will find proof of the following. Pornography contributes to shaping views on sexuality and on women, especially for young people, who mostly actually consider pornography as a reliable source of sex education. Porn encourages men and boys to see women as sex objects, subordinate to men, and girls to see themselves as such. Porn does not only shape sexuality, but also levels of empathy in communication, attitudes and behavior related to gender roles in families, in relationships. Inevitably, the rights, the dignity, and the place in societies of women are tremendously undermined. And finally, porn leads to a higher demand for prostitution. That's why I started this way. The link between human trafficking and porn are multiple, especially the financial profit. To put it in very clear terms, dangerous parts of the mainstream porn, as unregulated as they are in our internet era, lead to violence against women and are very strong promise for even more sexism. Now, I'm a human rights politician, so I defend freedom very strongly, but I also speak for all people. In our democratic societies, dear colleagues, it is our duty to think about setting limits to the right of personal expression when it is necessary in the interest of the protection of the right of others, and many others. Again, working on that report, I endeavored to depict a whole image. We all know here, ladies and gentlemen, that nothing is either black or white. So I have consciously worked above the political lines together with my fellow colleagues in the Committee of Equality and Non-Discrimination, including their inputs. That is why you will find in this report rather long parts dedicated to same-sex pornography and to the question of ethical pornography. With my fellow members of the committee, we call on member and observer states to first ensure a comprehensive, appropriate and mandatory education on related issues in all school curricula. Secondly, enhancing the skills of parents to deal with cybersexism and internet pornography. Extending the provisions criminalizing the glorification of criminal acts to cover violent porn. Requiring anti-porn filters in public libraries and schools, which is not happening. Or by default, you can use it that way. And fifthly, and there are more points, I just take 5 of them, promote research and more data collection in your national context. When I called Germany about 8 years ago relating to a most famous weekly in Germany, the Bordello of Europe, a few years ago, my fellow party members weren't always pleased. But so degrading the words were, so humiliating is the situation. So our coalition in Germany worked hard to adopt legal provisions to fight illegal prostitution and ensure safer conditions for sex workers. Now, I know it's a different subject, but we should do it the same approach, the same way, to find more security for the vulnerable in our societies. Once again, I'm not here to judge. I'm not here in the first place to ban porn. I'm merely trying to put my finger on a very dark and threatening waters so that we can harness them together. And I thank very much for that reflection in the committee and the co-workership with the office in Strasbourg and my team in Berlin. And I thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much, Mr. Heinrich. Anyone wants to react? Okay. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's quite an interesting report. I do have some reservations about the extent to which the author is encouraging governments to collect data about the pornography user of their citizens. In particular, introducing some kind of age verification service would also and could also be used as a mechanism to actually follow and see which citizens are watching porn and which kind of porn and so on and so forth. And I'm not sure that having a public registrar like that is in line with our ideas of privacy and our ideas of what government should or should not know about its citizens. I would like to just make a short point on something that I think is always meant very well by the people that say it, but because pornography is often connected with the objectification of women, I just have a small mental note. Something that always irks me the wrong way is when, like the speaker did in his speech, uses the position of women as sisters, wives, or daughters as a way to call for, I think, especially male sympathy. I don't think we need to be a sister or a mother to be allowed simple dignity and respect. And I never hear this said about husbands, sons, and fathers in this kind of context. So it's just food for thought. Is it really so that we always have to refer to women as our daughters and wives and children so that they get some sympathy from men? Do they always have to personalize it? Or can we consider women as human beings worthy of respect regardless of their position to you personally? Thank you.
Thanks, Suna, for your very important contribution for the discussion. Are there anybody else who would like to address for this item? If no, Mr. Heinrich, you would want to react what at least Suna stated. Do you want to add? You have a few minutes to time, 3 minutes. Mr. Heinrich.
Sorry, yes. Thank you for that remark. It was my introduction, and maybe that is something that I should reconsider. But from the whole report, I feel like we are in a very male-dominated society, and that's why I want to get the male under us to even think more about that imbalance in this area of our society, the pornography. With the data, yes, that's a danger, and that's just my plaidoyer, that in the countries they should rethink what is possible and appropriate. I just see that imbalance in the moment, even going worse. The gender equality in this era. And its impact on the society if we don't focus better and see in our different countries, maybe as a hint from us as the European countries, to really see better into it. I see it as a perpetuation of these imbalances, and in very many cases, relativation of violence. And that has a normative effect. And I just wish that we should not throw more light on this issue, and that we do what is appropriate and necessary to stop that harm. And I think that effect is different in different countries, but I see these dangers as the title has mentioned it, and that might differ as an answer in all the countries we represent. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Does the chair of the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination wish to take the floor? Please, Petra.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kimmo. I have to say that we had a lot of debates about this report in the course of time in our committee, and also it changed a lot in course of time. And Mr. Heinrich was very sensitive to many feedbacks we gave him. So I think that really it mirrors a a lot of opinions and of ideas of committee members. And of course, it's, the topic of the report is very much linked to the core issues of the Equality and Non-Discrimination Committee when it comes to human rights implication on freedom of expression, private life, gender equality, violence against women, human trafficking, sexual exploitation, child welfare and protection, and of course self-determination of women and gender equality. And sometimes we know comprehensive sexuality education at schools, at many schools' curriculums, and that because of that lack, young people often seek advice or information via pornography, and that of course sometimes gives young people a crazy imagination of how sexuality works. It spreads a lot of misinformation, and that could also be potentially harmful. So I think those countries who have the need to find regulations to pornography can have a guidance with this report. And as it is also Mr. Heinrich's last report at the moment, as he is leaving the German Bundestag, I want to thank him very much for his work and wish him all the best for the future. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Petra. The debate is closed, yes. And now we should move to the vote of the draft resolution, which has been presented to us. There was no amendments made for that one. So actually I'm asking straight away, can that resolution be adopted? And those who are in favor, please show. I got eight fine. Those against? No. You are, Fiona, you are against or for? For, then it's 9, 4. No, it's okay to be against also if somebody wish. Nobody against. I see no abstention. No, neither. So it's unanimously approved. Thanks. We move the next item, and the next item is the applause for the rapporteur. Yes, it was unanimous. Okay, now we move the last item of our standing committee for here in Rome, discrimination against Roma and Travellers in the field of housing. And the report will be presented by the chair of the Committee on Equality and Non-Discrimination, Petra Bail, because the rapporteur himself, Mr. Francisek Kopriva, is not here. So Petra, it's your responsibility now to do that.
Yes,
please, the floor is yours.
I'm very grateful that we can talk about this report one day after Slovakia officially apologized for the forced sterilization of Roma women. I think it's a significant day for the whole issue, which is on discrimination against Roma and Travellers in the field of housing. Let me invite you to a little time travel with me back to March 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic. You might remember at this time we had no tools to prevent the spread of COVID-19 apart from lockdowns, social distancing, and frequent hand washings, and sometimes wearing masks when they were available. Governments across Europe launched campaigns to alert the public to the actions everyone needed to take. And you might know, what does this have to do with the report about Roma and Travellers in the field of housing? In one word, everything. Dear colleagues, I'm sure you know throughout Europe, many Roma and Travellers live in unhealthy, overcrowded and unsafe conditions without access to running water, sanitation or other public utilities, and often at constant risk of eviction. These conditions can include isolated settlements or segregated parts of towns, insufficiently numerous and inadequate equipped halting sites for travelers or descript buildings, for example. But while circumstances may differ, what is clear that such situations are the result of centuries of discrimination, racism, segregation, and neglect. This reality has been denounced time and time again, but the European Court of Human Rights, European Court of Human Rights, the European Committee of Social Rights, ECRI, the Advisory Committee on the Framework Convention, UN human rights treaty bodies, national human rights institutions like the Islands Ombudsman for Children, and many, many others. But still the situation is persistent. So early last year, when governments asked citizens to do not sounded like a quite basic thing, stay indoors, keep their distance from people outside their houses, wash their hands frequently, self-isolate if you are ill, for many Roma and travelers, such measures were almost impossible to implement. These persons and communities were thus at great risk for their health. Yet some authorities did not bother to look for ways to overcome these problems or help to provide protection to Roma and travelers. Instead of ensuring a clean water supply and providing desertification or proper shelter, they placed settlements in quarantine, installed checkpoint controls, built temporarily walls, or carried out temperature controls by drones only for Roma settlements. In so doing, they not only failed to help Roma and travelers who needed it, but portrayed them as vectors of contagion. They stigmatized Roma and travelers as unclean or lacking discipline. They used the conditions created by their own persistent neglect of Roma and travelers to justify stigmatization and neglecting them further. And so they reinforced anti-Gypsyism and anti-nomadism, which are already deeply rooted in our societies. This is just one story, but there are so many others which Mr. Kopshiva has described in his report. Neglect, racism, segregation, and other forms of discrimination affect the housing situations of millions of Roma and travelers all over Europe. Forced eviction are common. This reality also violates many other rights of Roma and travelers, their health status and their right to adequate health care, access to education when schooling is interrupted due to evictions, or when children have nowhere to do their homework, the right to employment when settlements are situated far from town centers and from access to public transport. And as the NGOs where we met when preparing this report so powerful told us, isolated, segregated settlements also become easy targets for harassment, intimidation and violence, whether by members of the public or by authorities. Dear friends, this situation is a cause of shame for the whole of Europe, and yet, as the draft resolution before you today makes clear, there is plenty that we can do to set it right. We can and must put an end to forced eviction of Roma and travelers. We must map their accommodation needs and provide funding to invest in long-term, sustainable and holistic housing solutions. We must learn from good practices, as many do exist. We must strengthen anti-discrimination legislation, and all levels of government, local, regional and national, must work together with each other and with civil society to strengthen communication and trust so that the future can be built on solid foundations of inclusion, mutual understanding and shared goals. Dear colleagues, many Roma and travelers have been able to break past the obstacles that our societies have placed in their paths and have built strong and confident lives. But far too many are still held back, and discrimination in housing is a major part of that. Our committee unanimously adopted Mr. Kopshiva's draft resolution on discrimination against Roma and Travellers in the field of housing in September, and I hope that you will support it just as strongly now.
Thank you very much, Petra, for your summary of the report. I fully agree, as a chair even taking position, that the Roma communities throughout Europe are actually those ones who are very much discriminated everywhere in Europe. It's a really serious matter for all of us to consider. Thanks for having this report. Now, with this introductory word, I would like to open the discussion. Anyone wants to react? Floor is now open for you to participate. Seems to be so important item that we all fully agree. So nobody want to stress anything. Okay, if that's the case, I would like very much to thank you, Petra, once again. There is nothing to respond. You can obviously respond for the silence, which is here, but please say a few words if you want.
But I want to conclude, because also František Kopšiva was not re-elected to the Czech parliament, and so he will not be member of our assembly anymore, and I want to thank him not only for the work he did in the field of Roma and Travellers and others, but he also was for 1 year the chairman of the subcommittee on rights of minorities, and I also want to express my thank and gratitude for this work he has done, and wish him also all the best. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Petra. That's a pity news, obviously, but thanks that you reminded us on that one, and thanks for František Kopšiva, absolutely what he has made on this issue. Great. Now we move, actually, debate is closed, and we move to the vote of the draft resolution, and there are no amendments neither. Mr. Chilevich, you want to? No? We move to the amendments, which are not. There are no amendments at all, so we actually vote straight away on the whole report. Those who are in favor, please indicate. Chair usually don't vote, but I raise my hands only to calculate. But 14, great. Against? No one. Abstentions? Neither. So applause for the report. The resolution is approved. Okay, now we come to the almost last item of the session, standing committee meeting today. Any other business? Are there any other businesses on the agenda? No? Okay. Zingmeri. Emmanuel.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say thank you, and you should probably be all saying thank you for organizing in a smart way this fantastic meeting in Rome. That was really important. Simply, I would like to just remember that our parliament voted and expressed our clear opinion about last elections in Russia Federation, and we just brought our letter in the name of our Foreign Affairs Committee and Parliament to you about situation in Moscow during the elections and aftermath. So please, we will expedite our letter to you, and that's only for information reason. I don't want to raise new debates, nothing now, but just for information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will not open debate on that issue. Thanks very much for information. We move to the last item of the whole standing committee meeting. That's the next meeting. And actually, I'm very pleased to be informed that the new German parliamentary delegation, headed by Mr. Heinrich, understood so, is inviting the standing committee for its next meeting in March 2022 in Berlin. They wanted to actually organize the meeting already in Berlin during their chairmanship, but that wasn't possible because of Corona. We hope that the Corona situation is good enough. Good enough that we can come to the Berlin. Mr. Heinrich, you have the word.
Yes, thank you.
If you want to say a few words, please.
Now, I also, as Mr. Zingaris has said, I congratulate the Italians for the great hospitality and how it was all organized. Secondly, I wish a very good presidency for Italy for this next month. Thirdly, delegation, Frank Schwab. And Mr. Nick has asked me to give that invitation that you mentioned for the 11th of March. And we would really enjoy to have you all in Berlin, hopefully healthy and organizational possible. And then you will meet our new government. Probably in the next 2 weeks, we will have a new chancellor. I don't know if you will meet him personally, but he will be in charge, and the new members of the European Council, as you have to be appointed. I will not be anymore, so it will be my last speaking point now. And the dialogue on strengthening the European Council, that should be kept going, and we want to take on that baton in Berlin the 11th of March. Thank you very much. Hopefully we'll meet again.
Mr. Heinrich, on behalf of the whole committee, I would like to thank for your contribution for the work of us, particularly taking the note that, as you said, it was for the time being the last speech in the standing committee from your side because you lost the seat in the parliament. I have that experience also myself, and I want to say you only one thing. Remember, it doesn't matter how many times you are beaten down, it matters how many times you get up. So that's the future. So personally and also in
Thank you, I take that.
Yes, take the note on that one and put that in your diary and work. Okay, now I would like to thank all the participants for coming to Rome, and obviously, particularly, I would like to thank those who made it possible. There are several people behind the screens, someone here actually, you can also see them, technicians, interpreters, thank you very much, and the whole staff on Parliamentary Assembly side, you see some of the leaders here, but particularly also staff of the Italian Chamber of Deputies. You made it also feasible for us, although you were very, very disciplined. I try to follow also it, although I am always revolting, but that's personal, the problem of myself. Thanks indeed very much. Also, we are obviously indebted to thank the Italian delegation, and especially obviously Chair Mrs. Grande for the invitation in Rome. Obviously, it's one of the capitals of humankind in the world, thanks to be in Rome. There are few of us who can still continue a little bit during the weekend to stay here. The rest of you, if you go home, enjoy. We all have the good memory about Rome in our mind. Thanks for everybody. The meeting is now finished. Thanks. I forget. Oh, I totally forget. The totally last item is Secretary General. I was so enthusiastic thanking everybody, but Despina.
Dear President, dear all, I think in memory of this first physical meeting after a lot of time, almost 2 years, it's nice that we have a picture all together, those who are still here, members of parliament, secretaries of delegation, colleagues from the Italian parliament. May I invite you to come in front of the presidency for a last picture. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Despina.